Welcome to the Aspire podcast. I'm delighted today to be joined again by David Adams. Say hello, David.
Hello, Simon.
And Nicola Blake. Say hello, Nicola.
Hello.
And today we're going to be looking back at 2025, but more importantly, possibly, is looking forward towards 2026 and what's going on in Chester and Cheshire and around North Wales, Mold and Ruthin. So we're going to look at the property market, what's going on. So we're going to start with sales and look back at 2025. So there's a lot of headlines. We use this line a lot, which is there's no property market, there's a market for your property.
Yeah.
So it's actually quite individualised. But if we look at Chester and North Wales more broadly, how would you characterise 2025? Good year? Bad year?
I would characterise it as stability returning rather than growth accelerating. So actually looking at some stats, in Cheshire, so the CH postcode area, we've seen prices, the average prices have gone up by 1.6%. Instructions actually down 2.5%, but I wouldn't get too hung up on that because, the market can go up and down on instructions every year. Whereas in North Wales, so the double L postcode, we've seen the average prices have gone up 3%, and instructions actually gone up by 0.7%.
Which would exceed the overall market nationally that went, I think, by 2%.
Correct, yeah, correct.
In terms of instructions, and then the prices were relatively flat.
Yeah.
So actually any increase is actually quite good.
Absolutely.
But I mean, as a business, as Cavendish, how have you found the market? Was 2025 a good year, or was it?
Yeah,
from a sales perspective.
Yeah, from a sales perspective, a really good year. It's just I just think there's a lot more confidence in the market. I think the sellers that chose to come on the market a bit more realistic on prices. So I kind of feel like agents like ourselves and sellers were a bit more aligned on what's going on out there. Perhaps less properties coming on the market at excessive prices, to test the market. I think people have got their head round how to price a property correctly.
I mean, speaking to the people who know the data in the industry, it feels like we're now returning, as you said at the beginning, it's almost like more of a period of normality. Really 2010 to 2023-4 were a very odd period with massive fluctuations because of all the events that were going on locally and globally. Interest rates at a record low level. I mean, did you not have some data of interest rates back to the 1600s?
Yes, a good friend of ours, Simon.
Relevant
Gates.
and obviously very timely.
Yeah, so he tracked the base rate back to the 1600s because that sort of thing really excites him. And
a man after my own heart.
Absolutely. Hello, Simon. And he so the average base rate going back to the 1600s was actually 6.9%. So it's only been recently where we've seen interest rates dip below 2%.
So anyone looking at the property market should, especially if they're starting out on their journey, should be thinking, 5% is a long-term average. Where we are currently is actually quite good. And really 2010 to 2023, 24 were very unusual periods.
Yeah.
And actually a lot of people coming out of their fixed periods should also be aware of that fact because, again, we're coming out of an unusual period. So in reality, we're returning to normality.
Yeah, because what we've also seen, you think about when we're in lockdown and we had the stamp duty holiday, there have been several things that perhaps artificially inflate the market. So house prices were artificially inflated during that period. So it's very, I think sometimes, the headlines will compare perhaps something that was inflated compared to what's going on at the moment. Whereas if we look at what's going on at ground level now, we're actually in a very normal market. And yes, there isn't a massive headline, prices are surging by this amount or prices are falling by this amount. It's actually just fairly normal, actually quite stable, which is actually a good thing.
And this is why I'd always recommend, I'm not from the industry, but I would always recommend people is befriend a local estate agent because the national headlines from the national press are designed to get clicks. And in reality, they're national. What's going on locally is very different to what's going on nationally. And keep calm, carry on.
Every postcode has a different market. Every property, as you said before, has a completely different market. So don't worry about the national headlines.
So I've got to ask, is now a good time to sell?
It's always a good time to sell, Simon.
But wouldn't you say that, David?
As an estate agent, probably. But no, I in all seriousness, if you're a seller and you're thinking of coming onto the market because you need to move, because you found your next home or you're downsizing, whatever the motivation is, the best time to sell is actually when you need to sell. I think it's quite common that people try and time the market. So no, the best time to sell is when you need to sell
or want to.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we were talking about this before we started recording. Is whatever's happening to your house price is happening to other house prices.
Yeah.
If they're moving up, they're all moving up.
Absolutely.
If they're moving down, they're all moving down. Not that they really ever move down. But the reality is, if you're trying to wait for a gap where your house price has gone up and the one you want has gone down, that's incredibly rare.
And then taking into account, it now takes 200 days to actually move home, to actually sell your house and then move. Actually, then timing the market, it's virtually impossible because it takes 200 days to move.
So we're segueing quite nicely into 2026. So we'll hold that thought on 2026 of what we should do in terms of coming to market. Let's look at lettings.
Okay.
So I understand that rental inflation is at the lowest it's been for a very long time. So what's the average rental inflation going on at the moment?
It's sitting around 3.5% at the moment.
Okay, so that's kind of like, and that's that's not a normal. That's kind of quite a low one relatively, isn't it, to what it's been historically?
Yeah, so in previous years it's gone up quite high, and it's been dropping down gradually. But if landlords have kept doing their rent increases annually for their current occupied properties, then the values will catch up anyway.
And we're seeing two kind of markets forming where you operate, which is in Chester, Cheshire, we're seeing less stock.
Yes.
And around where you operate with Malden Ruthin, we're seeing more stock. Difficult question, but any explanations of why we're seeing a urban and a rural difference?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think certainly for the English side of the border, we are just kind of seeing tenants are staying in their properties longer. So although it might look like there's not newer properties coming to the market, there probably is still the same number of rental properties out there. It's just the tenants are staying there for a longer period of time. Wales, it's a bit nuanced. It's a bit of a different market, so it's harder to compare. So I don't really know what the answer is on that one, really.
But a long-term tenant's better than a short-term tenant.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't have void periods you don't have. And any reason do you think why that Wales would be a different market from a rental perspective? I mean, obviously, it's different jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, it's different types of property, different mix of property out there, different values altogether, and perhaps looking at it, thinking about this, it could be down to lifestyles, could be industries, jobs. Perhaps it'd be really interesting for us to actually do some research on this. But actually, perhaps people in Chester, you might find if you look at the distance to their place of work, might be very different to that in Wales, and therefore then people are then getting jobs in different towns and cities and thinking, actually, yes, we need to move. So maybe career change is higher in Wales. I don't know. It'd be interesting
also
to have a look.
A very different type of landlord. I mean, do you see this as a very different type of urban landlord versus if you're buying a family home around Mold,
so.
You're not buying a flat amongst a whole bunch of apartments in Chester city centre. That's a different type of landlord.
It is a different demographic of landlord in the areas, yeah.
So, go on.
Yeah, I was just saying, I think you've got more. I still think there's still a lot of accidental landlords in North East Wales compared to that of Chester. I think what we're seeing in Chester is perhaps more of a professional portfolio landlord, new breed of landlord coming about. Whereas in North Wales, there are still more accidental landlords. People letting out a barn conversion on their family's farm that's been in the family for 400 years. That's not going to be part of a big portfolio. That's literally, we just need to let out that property. And I think as well with that, you've got a lot of perhaps people who are doing short-term lets in North Wales that perhaps aren't seeing the returns that they once got during the staycation boom of 2020, 2021 that are now converting those to single lets.
Okay. Yeah. And same question to you as I asked David. Is now a good time to be a landlord?
Yes, definitely.
So much change, so many laws, regulations. Isn't it becoming harder and harder and harder to become a landlord?
I don't think it's harder. I think what is a good idea to have is make sure that you've got a professional person alongside you or a professional company guiding you and advising you on the legislation so that you can keep ahead of it.
And you do health checks, don't you?
We do, yeah.
We've talked about this before, and you were saying before we started recording, actually demand for people coming in and just saying, could you have a look at this, is increasing quite significantly.
Yeah, we've probably seen, I would say on average, one person a day book in with us, for a tenancy health check. So whether that's the time of year, obviously to take into account, a lot of people get the house in order, so to speak, at the beginning of the year, don't they? But also because of all the news with the Renters' Rights Act, I think there is more press about that now. And I think that landlords are switching on to, right, now probably is a good time, to actually do an audit on this.
And I think,
definitely.
isn't Big Bang, again, we're talking about England specifically here, Big Bang is May.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And when we did some research together before Christmas, we found awareness of what was actually happening was actually quite low.
It was 1 in 5 from memory, wasn't it?
Exactly. So never been a better time not only to be a landlord, but to have a chat with a professional lettings agent and find out where you stand. Because what's the fine? What's the penalties on both sides of the borders if you get it wrong?
Well, in England, as the Renters' Rights Act, it's a minimum 7,000, isn't it now?
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah. And that's for every single offence. So if you rock up, 10 offences, that could be a £70,000 bill.
Gulp.
Yeah.
And what's the average rent in Chester?
It's about £1,300 per month now.
So that's quite a few months.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would take you a few years, to get that back. And I think so on that, we do like to have exclusives on this podcast, don't we? We are actually putting on a landlord seminar for landlords in England. It's in Chester. It's on the 12th of March. It's going to be at the Doubletree Hotel in Hull in Chester.
What time is it?
It's at 6:30 p.m. It's going to be about 90 minutes long, and it's going to be a live Q&A with myself and Nicola. We're going to be going through the whole bill and really sort of what we want is landlords to walk away with an action plan of what they need to do. So actually some really key takeaways of what they can be doing right now to prepare for all of these changes.
And we'll put all the details below the video.
Absolutely.
But how would they find the details again if they want to book on?
So they can contact us. They can go to chesterlandlordevents.co.uk and there will be a booking link on there.
So date,
12th of March,
location,
at the Doubletree Hotel in Hull,
time,
6:30 p.m.
cost,
free.
Excellent. We like the word free.
We do.
Especially there's a potentially £70,000 bill coming down the line. Well, anyway, you'd avoid those at all possible.
Yeah,
in terms of costs. Ouch. I think we talked about it the first time we spoke about it. And I don't think people are really aware actually what the costs would be if they got it wrong.
Yeah.
No.
And there's 170 pieces of legislation in the UK,
Yeah.
in England.
Over that now.
Yeah.
And I think as well, like people now, so in each local authority, there is actually, there is someone in charge of implementing this. And actually the local authorities are now incentivized to seek and prosecute non-compliant landlords. So it's someone's job to go and find non-compliant landlords.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Now, if that person's on commission,
Ouch.
Yeah, and it's something that kind
scary.
of crept in through the back door, didn't it? Because that came in as part of the Renters' Rights Act, and everyone thinks that the Big Bang date is the 1st of May.
Mm-hmm. Right, I said it myself.
For the changes, but actually this part of implementation came in on the 27th of December. So council.
It was a nice Christmas present from the government, wasn't it? Lovely.
You've just had Boxing Day out the way. You've still got all your cold cuts, and everything.
Still watching all the repeats on.
And
the
someone
TV.
investigating your property portfolio.
Yeah, someone knocking on
Merry
the door.
Christmas.
Yeah. Terrifying.
So again, it's not my job to sell these guys, but why wouldn't you do a tenancy health check and just basically find out where you sit? It seems relatively straightforward. And again, you have these. I need to talk at your pricing model because you seem to do a lot free.
Yeah. Well, so one of our big missions is that we want to help as many landlords as possible in our area. Be safe and compliant. That's one of the things we love doing at Cavendish. So we do our quarterly webinars. We're doing our first seminar in March, and I think what our plan will probably be to do 1 or 2 seminars a year, as well as the 4 webinars we do as well. So we're very much we are educating our local landlord community to help raise the standard of
And if
letting
you're not
in the
a
area.
current landlord, but for happen chance, an accidental landlord, you inherit a property, or you decide that you want to go down this route, the best time to learn about this is before you start, or
Absolutely,
as soon as you can.
Yeah, and yes, and we've got loads of free resources. So I wrote a book last year.
Did you write a book, David?
I did. I don't know if I've mentioned it, but
What's the book called, David?
it's called The Landlord's Playbook.
And can you get this online, David?
Yes, you can get it on Amazon. In fact, it was an Amazon bestseller. But no, joking aside, if anyone wants to, if anyone's watching or listening to this podcast, if you just message me, find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, email me, if you message me, with the phrase landlord's playbook, I'll send you a copy for free, because we just want as many landlords to be safe and compliant and raise the standard in our local area. So we'll give you a free book. We'll give you a free landlord health check. Come along to one of our landlord events. We want to help you.
Because, and there's no investment advice, prices of investment go down as well as up, bricks and mortar still remains one of the best investment classes you can have.
Absolutely.
We're not building enough houses, and therefore they appreciate in value.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about exchanges, but actually I think we've talked a lot about the property market in 25. I think people really want to know what's going on in 2026, and that probably is more important to people. I have done both for some work that we do, so-called the Voice of the Agent, but we've looked at all the forecasts of what everyone's predicting. The consensus is we're going to get lower positive growth in 2026 for house prices.
Yeah.
About 1% to 4%.
Yeah.
Does that align with what you're seeing locally in Cheshire and Wales, or does it that, again, there is no national market for property?
Yeah, I think a very short answer to the question really is that 2026 it's a postcode to postcode market. I think it'd be you could get caught up in the national predictions, national headlines, but it's very much, as Kate Fortner said at your event, there is no property market. There is a market for your property, and I think every property has its own little micro market. There'll be a property market for your town, for your city, for your street. So I think it's very different per property,
and it's type of house, tenure of house, age of house.
Absolutely, the demographic of the buyer, whether it's an upseller, a downseller, retirement property, so many things.
So do you think Cheshire and North Wales will buck the national market? Do you think we'll be stronger here than we are across the country as a whole?
Following on from what happened in 2025, I think we'll see Cheshire, which obviously has higher values than North Wales. I think we'll see less house price growth less transaction volumes in Cheshire, whereas the transactions in North Wales will be slightly higher because of the property values are lower. And I think with Cheshire, buyers are more susceptible to the higher mortgage rates.
Right. Yes. Going to come down further? Mortgage rates?
I would think so. I mean, it all depends on what you read. There are various reports out there to say, that they're probably as low as they're going to get for some time. There are some other predictions that say, they are going to come down a lot further. I think something that's interesting is the actual house price to income ratio is at the lowest it's been for some time. So I read something the other day. It's actually the lowest it's been since the mini budget. But interestingly, 2 out of 3 mortgages have now got 2 names on it. Right. Whereas if you look at, a lot of people will compare, mortgage rates and affordability to, 15, 20 years ago, whereas the majority of people bought a property on their own, whereas now most people buy a property with their partner, wife, husband.
Because they're waiting longer, they're then in long-term relationships, whereas often a long time ago you'd buy by yourself as the first property on the property ladder.
Absolutely, yeah. Whereas now there's more 2-income households basically.
And are you seeing any changes in terms of the lettings market? Do you think 3.5% is the where we've reached in terms of increases? Do you think that's where we're going to sit in 2026?
I think it will sit around that. I don't see it moving up too much more really.
And it's quite critical that you have those annual reviews of where your market competitive.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So regional winners and laggards. We saw in the data, and we didn't really talk about it just then, but I see a lot in the data. The Southeast and London are not hot at the moment.
No.
They're relatively cool to the rest of the UK. We're seeing some good booms around the rest of the UK. What would need to change? Cheshire's an outlier because obviously it's kind of urban conurbation. It's quite an affluent place already.
Yeah.
So it sits there as almost an island around an area that's growing okay, and bucking the national trend. Chester's not. What do you think would need to change? It's not your patch in the Southeast and Chester for us to see the growth coming back in house prices.
What would need to change in the Southeast?
And Chester, the places where we're seeing the kind of.
I mean, obviously, if if there was a house price correction, i.e., prices dipped, then that would see some positive, in terms of transactions would go up, but we don't want to see that, do we? It's not something that makes pretty headlines.
No.
So, to get things going, are we going to see perhaps a house price dip
Well,
in those areas to get things going?
I think
I don't see it personally,
we should
but-
do a podcast about that specifically.
Yeah.
Because there's so much good data from people like the aforementioned Kate Faulkner, Roger Martin Fagg, and people like that, talking about what's happening in the market over the next 5-6 years.
Yeah.
We've got a bit of a demographic shift happening.
Yeah.
I think this year, more people are dying than have been born.
Oh, really? Right, okay,
And
that's
actually,
interesting.
by the end of the year, now you won't hear this many other places, but at the end of the year, we'll be in a net zero migration situation. So there'll be more people leaving than are coming in, overall with a natural decline in population. So migration by the end of 2026 could be zero,
Interesting.
which considering the debate we have as a country about that
Yeah.
subject, and not for a topic for us, but that has a material impact on house price rises.
Interesting.
And it's fair to say we have a boom going through, a baby boom, for want of a better term,
Yeah.
going through the cycle, and people are leaving.
Yeah, so then we're going to see a lot of larger family homes coming on the market. And if a lot of those come on the market, then obviously we won't see as much house price inflation for that type of property, because there'll be loads on the market, but more choice equals, prices will be a bit more sensitive, won't they? But it'd be interesting to see what the chain reaction of that is on the rest of the market. Because I think what we spoke about on last month's podcast, that almost what the government need to be doing is helping incentivize the people at the top of the chain with those larger houses, because at the moment there isn't any incentive for those people to move. And actually, rather than help to give more support to first-time buyers who are already stretched for affordability, actually we should be giving some help to incentivize perhaps the baby boomers to downsize. Whereas at the moment, those people are living in a massive house, no mortgage, no incentive to move.
The baby boomers I speak to as well is there's nowhere for them to move to. They don't want to move into senior living village accommodation yet, or retirement villages. They don't feel at that stage, Mick Jagger's doing all right, and I think, is he nearly 80 now?
Probably, yeah.
I mean, interestingly, I might take my sample size of me is always dangerous, but I look at myself. I'm a northerner, became a Midlander, became a Londoner, became a Southeasterner, a Midlander, and now I'm back to being a Midlander. It's more of like if you're listening to this and you're outside the area that Cavendish operate, what are the benefits of living in this part of the world rather than the crowded London and Southeast, renting or buying?
There's so much more space. I think, without sounding cheesy, it's a lovely place to live. It's a lovely place to live. It really is. There's lots of green space. There's lots going on. It's, we're not absorbed by, we don't have house prices like the South. So it's more affordable. Therefore, it brings, different types of people. There's good jobs around here. There's a lot of industry, a lot of large companies, do invest quite heavily around here. So yeah, it's a nice place to live, I would say.
I would echo all of that for renting as well.
Yeah, I mean, we lived in the Southeast, and I was doing a video in Grantham, which is where I now live, and I just looked at the house prices. And I remember going back that weekend to my wife and going, look what we could own in this part of the world.
Yeah, I bet.
Look what we could own. Long story short, we bought a house that is twice the square footage of the one we had for 5/7 of the price. And it's the nicest house we've ever lived in.
Yeah.
Literally is. When I was a kid and I drew up my tick box, it was an L-shaped house with 2 staircases, stone walls, beams, got it all.
Wow.
Got it all. And it's like with a huge garden right in the centre of Grantham for 5/7 of the house that I had, which was in a suburb of a less attractive town in the southeast. It was, there's a thing called the internet and work from home and,
Zoom.
and around here, I hear you've got some quite big towns like cities like Chester, and there's a little one called Liverpool and Manchester, and
A little one.
they're not that. They're quite like small and pokey, I understand.
Yeah.
But
fairly,
they have telephones too, don't they?
Yeah.
Apparently.
It's quite radical. So if you're outside this area, and I love this part of the world, I live on the other coast, over in Lincolnshire, but there's a lot to be said for living out the southeast these days in London.
Yeah.
I mean, I love London, but it's crowded and it's expensive. I often play the game is pick your house up wherever you live and put it in Clapham
Oh, yeah.
and see what it'd be worth.
How
Because
much
they're
would it be
paying
worth?
that much money for a house
Yeah.
Same.
that is so much nicer in this part of the world and more
Yeah.
affordable.
Yeah. Yeah.
This
It's
ends
bad.
the advert for the Northwest Tourist Board.
Yeah. There you go.
I'm on commission. I'm not. Okay, so big things happening. Big days happening. Renters' Rights Act. So obviously things have started, as you alluded to earlier, which is really important for people to note. From May 2026, England moves to a very different rental system. For landlords and agents operating in England, the Renters' Rights Act is more about risk management. Is it more about risk management, or are they trying to reshape the market?
Yeah, so I kind of think it's a bit of both. In the short term, there will be a lot of risk management that's needed. But then as long as you've got good documentation, you're proactive with your tenants, with managing the property and the compliance is in order, then that can be manageable. And it will raise the bar. Over the longer term, I think it will reshape the market. But it's more likely to favour the professional landlords over the accidental landlords that we're seeing next in the market.
Is it still worth being? What do we mean by accidental landlord for those who don't know what an accidental landlord is?
So many years ago, it was the people that have tried to sell their property and struggled to at the time, which that doesn't really happen now. Properties tend to sell fairly easily if they're priced properly. Yeah. So if they couldn't sell, they would rent it as an alternative, or perhaps they've inherited a house that they might not want to let go of, but they're not really sure what to do with it. So they think, well, we'll rent it out for a bit and see how it goes.
But if you are in that situation, which will still be a large section of the market, is now the time to sell up and get out of the game, or is it still worth being a...
I think it depends. It depends what your ambitions are. I think, and perhaps a lot of people will get hung up on. They'll measure yield, let's say, based on what the property's worth, and then how many pounds per calendar month they get for it. But what they're then forgetting is the capital appreciation. Actually, if you look at the return on investment, the ROI, and you've got the actual cash yield, and then you've got the capital growth as well. When you put that all together, the compound effect, it's you will struggle to get something that's as safe as bricks and mortar. You'll struggle to get the same return elsewhere. And when interest rates surged a few years ago, we had landlords saying, "Oh, I can get 12%, in a savings account." And it's like, yes, but you won't get 12% every year for the next 20 years.
I know people I know very well from my family who are in the next generation up, who've seen their income crash as interest rates have come down.
Yeah.
Meanwhile,
Stocks and shares,
a property portfolio will keep marching up
Yeah.
it's just going
with
up.
the rental yield.
And I think, obviously in Chester, we looked at some data, and yes, the rental inflation is at its lowest it's been for many years. Obviously, back in 2022 and 23, it peaked at about 12.5% for Chester. Some very high inflation. I think rental values have gone up by about 35-36% in the last few years. Yes, we're now at a point where inflation is relatively low, but look at the growth it's had in the last few years, and I can't remember a time where we saw negative rental inflation. It just doesn't happen, does it? These days.
For a very long time.
And rental inflation is you can index it against wage growth, and that is just going up and up and up, isn't it? So if you're a landlord, there is no, you're always going to get a good return on investment. Your rental income will always go up, but it's very important that landlords follow that trend, because it's quite common for a landlord to not put their rent up for 4, 5, 6 years, and then suddenly be in a place where they think, oh, we're actually getting half the market rate, and then it's actually quite hard to suddenly up that to market value, because that would be ludicrous, wouldn't it?
Yes.
If a tenant's paying £700 a month, the market is £1,500 a month, let's say, you can't just go and increase the rent to £1,500 a month. You need to do it a certain way, but the risk associated with that, if you make a mess of it, what you might find is that your tenant gives notice, and then you've got a property that hasn't been let for 10 years, that's now in desperate need of modernisation and refurbishment, and it hasn't been performing for quite a few years. So have you got the cash reserves to actually invest, to reinvest in that property? So there's a lot to it, and we actually cover a lot of this in our aforementioned tenancy health checks.
Brilliant. So let's get into some specifics very, very briefly. Section 21 is abolished from the 1st of May. So what do I do then? I've got a bad tenant.
There will still be routes to possession. You just have to serve a different notice. So they will be called Section 8 notices, and there are different grounds.
So I can still get a bad tenant
Yeah.
out of my property
Correct.
if required. It's not that I'm now stuck with someone for life if they're causing significant grief or problems.
No. The only difference is you're going to have to give a genuine reason as to why you want the property back or why you need that tenant to leave. So in the past, landlords have most often used the Section 21 because it's the easiest route.
Because
to
there's
get
no
a tenant
reason
out.
needs to be given. It's
and
just
you don't have to give a reason.
No blush notice, we used to call it, didn't we?
Yeah. So if you want to sell, then that's fine. You just have to say, I'm serving you notice because I need to sell the property. Or
So
I need to move back
and this
in.
is useful if you're a landlord, is if you need to sell your property, which is often a reason why Section 21s would have been used historically,
Yeah.
because you don't have to give a reason.
You can
All
still
you
do
would now need to do is give the reason,
Yes, that's it.
and you can still.
However,
I was
there
gonna
is
say.
a bit of a caveat
There is
to this.
another
This
option to
this
that.
is why we need to get into this.
Yeah, before loads of landlords, you have to make go, oh, we'll just serve notice on the tenant and say we're selling. If you serve a notice on the tenant to say that you're selling the property, you can't relet that property for 1 year.
Right.
So you basically, if you're going to sell the property, you have to sell the property.
'Cause this
or have a void
then
period for a year.
Well, I think wasn't a government minister got into trouble for this, is they said they were going to put the property on the market
Yeah,
and then they relet it at a much higher rate.
that's
Yeah.
right.
And whatever the reasons, the good, the bad, or whatever, I'm not concerned about that.
No.
Is it would stop a landlord going, I'm selling,
And then they leave.
I just want to put the market up, the price up a bit
Yeah, you
more than
can't
the
do
current
that.
tenant.
Yeah.
You can't do that anymore.
So I think something that will probably become more common, which is actually something that we do, is actually off-market landlord to landlord sales. So what we do, if one of our landlords or another landlord comes to us and says, I want to sell my rental property, I've got a tenant in, we will say, don't serve notice. Let's try and sell it to another landlord who will inherit the tenancy. Now with that, you're not having to serve notice. So I actually think if landlords are looking to perhaps flirt with the idea of selling, test the water, actually that's a very safe container to do that in because it's off market, it's discreet, and you're not having to actually serve notice on the tenant. You're just putting it out there. And if you agree a sale, then happy days. But you're not having to serve notice. So I think that'll become a lot more common going forward.
And actually, the house next to the one we've just bought, that was sold that way, landlord to landlord,
Off market, yeah.
off market, and the tenant who was there is still there. And
Yeah.
very happily under a good pair of rent and a good tenant.
So
Just the person wanted to
It's
decumulate
great.
their
It's great.
asset.
There's no upheaval for the tenant. Then they can stay where they are. And
Oh, absolutely. And the way I look at it is if you're a landlord and you buy a buy-to-let property and you go through the conveyancing process, which, as we know, takes a long time these days, you finally get possession of it, completion day, and then the average buy-to-let, you'll probably have to give it like a paint, maybe do a small refurb. That might just be carpets. Then you get a letting agent out to come and take some photographs and put it on the market. Now the average property probably takes a week to 2 weeks to actually let with a letting agent, but the tenant might not want to move in for a few weeks. So from actually completing on the property to actually moving a tenant in, if you're redecorating it and recarpeting it, you might be talking 2 months. But during that 2-month period, you're paying your mortgage. So actually, if you look on a return on investment point of view, and you think of it as a business, you've got your expenditure coming out because, well, first of all, you bought the property, but if you look at monthly expenditure, you've paid your mortgage for, let's say, 2 months. You've also paid for the decorating, for the carpets. You've then paid the letting agent to actually let the property. You've then paid to get the property compliant. So I'm talking EPC, EICR, gas, etc., etc. Then you get your first month's rent in. So it's going to take you several months, possibly even more than a year, to actually break even on that investment. Whereas if you buy a tenanted property and you complete on a Friday and the rent comes in the following Wednesday, you've made a return on investment straight away and you haven't had to pay anyone to let it or decorate it or anything. So it's a much attractive option, I think.
Especially if it's fully managed.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, because
you
compliance is
literally have
taken
no
care of.
hassle on your
That's it.
books then.
Yeah.
No. So what we do with these things, actually, when we actually prepare one of these to actually put out there to investors, we do a compliance audit on it. So we do a tenancy health check on it so that we know if we're advertising these properties to other landlords, they are completely compliant. They're not buying a dud property, basically.
So I come into some money. I think I want to get into basically the property landlord space. Rather than me looking at buying a property and then putting it to let, the thing I should do is speak to you guys and go, are there any properties coming up that are currently tenanted that I could buy
Absolutely.
and build my portfolio that way?
Yeah, we can source one for you.
Okay. Now, we are a nation of 4 countries. Wales is obviously a different country. It's the only part of Great Britain retaining a form of no-fault possession. Does that make the Welsh rental market more attractive to landlords or simply differently regulated?
Yeah, I think it just makes it just differently regulated. There's a lot more compliance that comes from Wales, including registration on Rent Smart Wales. Lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I think just picking on what you said there. In Wales, it's basically you have to be fully licensed, training course, exam, etc.
I remember when it came in, it was a big thing.
Yeah, or you use a letting agent. Whereas over in England, obviously, yes, there's no Section 21 come the 1st of May, but you can still self-manage your property without any qualification, training. So actually, I think the standard of rental property is higher in Wales, and I think we still will see that. It still will be higher in Wales. Yes, obviously, the Renters' Rights Act is a good shake-up, and but policing it will be one thing. And yes, there are people at local authorities, like I said before, who actually are looking to go after non-compliant landlords. But in Wales, it very much is you fully manage, or you have to do everything yourself.
I think it
so
makes
it's very
it clearer,
different,
doesn't it, for landlords, so they know if they're choosing a managed agent, they know that they don't have to worry about any of it. Whereas if they're going down the self-managed route, there's so much that they have to think about to make sure that the property's safe.
And so much stuff changes. I mean, we get updates, from our regulation bodies, don't we? Pretty much on the weekly basis, to say, by the way, this has changed now. And it's not just, most of it doesn't make the headlines. So obviously things like the Renters' Rights Act are now creeping into the headlines because, when we did that survey, literally 1 in 5 people weren't ready for it. There was a small percentage that had never even heard of it.
Yes.
And believe you me, a lot of those people are the people that we're talking to at the moment, as in they're approaching us going, I've not heard of this. What is this new magic you're speaking about? So yeah, it's very different, isn't it?
Yeah, but also to add to that as well, though, Renters' Rights Act is slowly creeping into the Renting Homes Wales Act as well.
Is it?
Yeah, it is.
So
we're seeing convergence.
There's going to be a bit of amendment for anti-discrimination and pets in lets as well.
Which sort of then segue, because obviously 2026 is a big year. Local elections in England, national elections in Scotland and Wales. Obviously the Senate elections will have a big impact on housing policy. So from everything that we can read with the current polls as they are, there's still 5 months to go, 4 months to go, it's going to likely produce some sort of strange coalition government after quite a long period of a Labour government in Wales.
It's going to be very different, isn't it? And I know that so Plaid Cymru and Reform are at the top of the polls at the moment, are they? But I don't think they'd work together, though, would they? So it's, I don't think that, in terms of a coalition, I don't think there's a lot of people that would actually form a coalition together. So I really don't know, to be honest. I think it'd be very interesting to follow this year.
But I mean, obviously, this is not a politics podcast, and we don't want to get into that.
No.
Everyone out there has very different views, and I always, when I speak to agencies, don't do politics. The politics don't matter to your customers because they're all colours and all stripes within your politics.
Yeah, definitely.
The thing that I would then ask is, in that situation with quite a large population of, let's call them non-professional landlords, for want of a better term, what do you do with potential change literally on the horizon? What's the first thing they should be doing? I
would say get your house in order. So get a tenancy health check, look at your tenancy files and make sure they're all up to date, because I think, with any change like this, and change is the word, with a new government, there will be change. And I think, there'll be people wanting to make a point.
And this is a hot topic. Housing is always a hot topic, and you can make, because obviously it touches those people who are in the landlord space, the buying and selling space, and the tenant space, many of whom are children to people who are the landlord space and the house buying and selling space.
Absolutely,
so it's kind of like it is a very, not a low hanging fruit. It's a hot potato, to mix my metaphors.
Yeah,
but it's a topic that they need to get into, and they will for political reasons.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately, I don't agree with this, but landlords are a very easy target, it seems, at the moment. I mean, everyone just seems to want to go after landlords. Also, what they're doing as well is they are looking at reforming the actual house buying and selling process as well, aren't they? So yeah, there's going to be a lot of change on the way. So I think our advice would be, to any landlord out there, get ahead of the curve and actually get your house in order, do an audit, and just make sure that you're protected. Because if they bring in change, we've got a lot of change. They bring it in now, like overnight. Obviously, with the Renters' Rights Act, etc., they've given us a big lead in, haven't they? But some change can happen very quickly, like that change on the 27th of December. That crept in through the through the door, didn't it? Basically. So yeah, now's a good time to do an audit, I would say.
So go on. Final couple of questions from me for both of you. The last one's going to be a bit of fun, so strap in for that.
Strapped in.
My first question of my final two to both of you. So I want to ask that is, from a sales perspective, if I am looking to, let's say, sell a property in 2026, what is the best advice or best bits of advice you could give me?
Best bit of advice would be, well, first of all, speak to a professional. It's not just, don't just look on, the portals, Rightmove, Zoopla, etc., and form your own opinion almost. I would speak to a professional who will sort out a strategy to get you the best price. And there's so much, behind that, I could go into, but, there is a process to get you the best price. And it isn't always, I think over the last few years, the average property that's been on the market has reached within about 1 to 1.5% of the asking price. So long are the days of perhaps putting a property on the market, 10% overvalue to test the water. That isn't the best thing to do. And the longer a property is on the market, the lower the price it achieves. So,
everyone I speak to, there's an epidemic of overvaluing.
Yeah.
Because people want to win the instruction. It flatters the seller to get a big valuation.
Yeah.
That's a disaster. With a house next to us on the other side, we live in a row of houses. I think it's on the market for 14 months. And it's like, they're massively overvalued. Go on, got some data. We like data.
Yeah, so do you know what? So here are some interesting facts about the last year. So only 53.5% of homes that come onto the market actually sell. Now, most people, I would imagine, if you ask, a member of the public, what percentage of properties do you think actually sell? I think most people would probably say 80%, 90% probably.
It was more than that,
it's around half. And, the main reason for that is overvaluing. So here are some interesting stats that if a home hasn't sold by week 12 being on the market, then the chances of it selling are 14.5%. Whereas if you agree a sale within the first 25 days, you have a 94% chance of that sale going through. So the big message here is price it right from the start. Time kills deals.
And don't be flattered by the highest valuation.
Yeah.
That is not the determinant of whether or not you're going to successfully sell the property.
And, here's a little soundbite. Homes that are overpriced don't wait for the right buyer. They reduce in price. So, that's not a great strategy, is to wait for the right buyer. So if anyone wants to speak to us about that, we're more than happy to. That's part of our process. We have a 9-step process that we go through to get sellers the highest price in as quick a time as possible. So if anyone wants to chat about that, let me know.
And then from a letting perspective, if there's one or bits of advice you would give if I'm thinking of letting my property, maybe I'm with another agent or I'm getting into the market, what's with the advice you give?
I would say just make sure you're speaking and dealing with a knowledgeable agent that keeps ahead of all of the legislation that's coming through, so that they can educate landlords on what they need to do as well.
And look for evidence that they're doing that educational stuff.
Yeah, so qualified agents, if they're members of Property Mark, then you know that they know their stuff. So
you're going to give it time on this second question, which is a bit of fun. We're going to ask David first. And
Right.
We've had no preparation for this. So this could all go horribly wrong, ladies and gentlemen.
Probably.
If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about the buying and selling process, what would it be?
Change one thing about the buying and selling process. I would actually, so this is something that we've recently implemented. I would actually make it mandatory that that buyers and sellers sign reservation agreements.
Okay.
Now we work with a company. They're called Gazelle, and they're backed by the Law Society. Basically, when we use a reservation agreement in a sale, the fall through rate reduces to about 5%. Whereas the
What's the normal?
So it's between 25 and 30%.
Oh, wow.
So the headline that's been used for many, many years is 1 in 3 sales will fall through. But sort of going into that a bit further here, if you have a reservation agreement, where basically buyer and seller, they put some money on the table, what you tend to find is that the deal actually goes through quicker as well, because obviously, there's a financial, there's an additional financial incentive here.
Skin in the
so
game.
actually sales that go through quicker, sales that go through with more certainty, when you agree a sale, 1 in 3 of those sales are going to fall through. And that's not just the transactional thing here I'm thinking of actually, dreams are shattered, as in, your dream home that you've put your house on the market, to get your kids into the local school. If that falls through, dreams are shattered. It's so much more of a personal thing. So I honestly think that more agents should be using reservation agreements.
And what does a reservation agreement cost? What's kind of like the normal kind of like, what are you on the hook for as a percentage of your property?
I mean, so it starts off, people can pay around 1%, let's say,
Okay.
Or there are reservation agreements that can be 5%, 10% even. But I think if you buy a property at auction, then you pay a reservation fee.
You do.
If you buy a new build, you pay a reservation fee. So why is it that the private treaty market is the only part of the market where no one has to pay a reservation fee?
And this
or
sort of
signs
reduces
of a commitment.
gazumping, it reduces fall throughs.
Yeah, gazumping, gazundering, because
Okay.
I think from a seller's point of view, but from a buyer's point of view as well on this is, if let's say a seller is agreed on a property, then that property goes off the market. It's off the market, viewing stop, etc., etc. But as a buyer, from the buyer's perspective, how do you know the buyer's off the market? Because every day, Rightmove and various other outlets are sending them, news clippings, house price indexes saying, property prices are decreasing in the area. Here's another one that's sold, and also agents are sending them listings of other properties that might be, more desirable, cheaper, etc., than the property they're finding. So actually, if we can get buyer and seller to agree to both come off the market,
Yep.
then actually that's why the deal will go through quicker and with more certainty. So yeah, when a reservation agreement is in place, like the ones that we use, the fall through rate goes down to about 5%. So from 1 in 3 to 1 in 20. So why wouldn't you?
Love
That's
it.
my question.
So now you've had plenty of time to think.
Yeah.
So obviously two very different sides. The dynamic between buyer seller is very different to landlord and tenant. If you could wave your magic wand, I'll give you a magic wand. You're the fairy godmother. What is the one change you'd make to the lettings market?
You've had so much time to prepare, by the way, haven't you? Come on.
You have
It
infinite
would be
power, Nicola. Imagine.
Yeah, it would be legislation based. I would make it the same.
No legislation.
No legislation. I would take it back to a one size fits all kind of legislation. So Housing Act, and so Wales and England wasn't separate because it's so diverse between the areas that we operate. It's
so disjointed, isn't it?
Yeah.
And actually, if you're a landlord with properties on both sides of the border, and the border is
Which, by the way,
Literally
we
in the middle
have
of where we
quite
operate.
a lot of
I
landlords who
bet
have
you with where you're
Yeah.
located.
feet in both camps. It's
Yeah.
so confusing.
I think the
isn't it?
hotel I stayed in was in. I don't know. I'm not sure actually. I don't know which side of the border it was on. I'm not going to show my ignorance on that one.
You were in England last night.
Yes.
The
Just-
border
Oh,
was
oh,
about
yeah.
a foot away from where you stayed last
Okay,
night.
I thought it was that close. And I was thinking, was my hotel literally on one side or this side? I don't know. And that's what it can be like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So harmonisation or convergence would be really useful.
Definitely.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
also
definitely.
I was thinking about this on the sales side of it as well. I would make it, if I can give an option on that.
Yeah, please do. No, please.
I would make it mandatory that sales have to complete within sort of 28, 35 days, because
Yeah.
then everybody knows where they stand. They're not waiting for months and months and months for the conveyancing to go through. And, I'm a moving this day, I'm a moving next week. And I just think it would just make it a lot more uniform for everybody.
I heartily agree, having just been through 180 days of buying.
Yeah, because as we said before, time kills deals, and the longer it's a well-known fact that the longer a sale goes on for, the more probability it will fall through. So if we could speed up the house buying process, it's funny, there's almost a estate agency reform bill that's being formed at the moment, isn't there? And I think actually reforming the home buying and selling process will be a massive game changer because it's never been this bad in terms of how long it takes.
And it's not as if they don't do this in other parts of the world quite a lot as well, which we learn from.
I think other countries, look at our system and just laugh and just think, what's
having worked internationally in property, yes, they do. They think it's hilarious.
Yes, Australia, they've just got it made, haven't they? Like it's amazing over there.
Brilliant.
Anyway,
David, Nicola, thank you very much. Please, we'll put all the links we've talked about underneath the comments, so you'll see links to the books and other things that we've talked about. Get yourself booked in for a tenancy health check, and I look forward to seeing you all next month for the next episode of Aspire.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.